going to start in 1986. We were not yet the National Center on Education and the Economy. The people who are now at the core of our organization were then working for Carnegie Corporation of New York. In 1986, we issued a report called A Nation Prepared. And the first few paragraphs of that report described a factory belonging to a company few Americans had heard of called Samsung. And we told the people who read our report that that factory, just a few miles outside of Seoul, produced home videotape recorders for use in the United States, all under other names than Samsung. The United States had stopped producing home video recorders because it could not compete with this plant. The people in the plant, we told our audience, worked 7 days a week. They had 2 days off a year. They worked for 12 hours a day. They made $3,000 a year. That's how we framed our education report. That was the year 1986. We were trying to warn this country. In 2000, we issued our next report under the banner of the National Center on Education and the Economy. We tried to get the argument into the title. It was called America's Choice: High Skills or Low Wages. That report began by saying that Korean low-skilled workers were working for 1/10 of what American low-skilled workers were making, and they were making the same stuff to sell into the same markets. And we pointed out in the year 2000, this is not all that long ago, that Chinese low-skilled workers were working for 1/100th of what American low-skilled workers were making for. And we tried again to sound the alarm. Back then, in the year 2000, this country thought, if it thought there was any challenge at all, that it was a challenge to low-skilled workers. Few imagined that anybody else might be threatened. In 2006, we issued our third report, Tough Choices or Tough Times. And here we reported on what Tom was just talking about. I could do that from my own personal experience. My oldest son is an electrical engineer. He designs custom computer chips. And he called me about that time, and he said to me, "Dad," he's working for one of the big Silicon Valley companies, he said, "Dad, I am now on a work team making custom computer chips. It has people on it from all over the world, including from China. The Chinese engineers know everything I know, and they can do everything I can do, and they're making 1/4 of what I'm making. And we're all connected together on one team through the internet. That's how this company works." And he asked me, his question to me was, did I make the wrong career decision? It's not a joke. It's not a joke because people think of, and this makes Tom's point, engineering as a very high-skilled occupation. It is, but much engineering work is actually routine. And if somebody else on the other side of the world can do highly skilled but routine work and is charging less for it than we charge here in this country, employers, big, small, and medium-sized, will choose the person who will charge less for the same skills. What has happened in the world is that we have gone from local labor markets to global labor markets at the low skill level, the medium skill level, and the high skill level. We are competing at each of these skill levels with others with the same skills. If you think about it then, and you look at the United States, what you find is that what we charge for our labor at the low skill, medium skill, and high skill level, all skill levels, is higher than most of what the rest of the world charges. So the reasonable question, the crucial question for this country to answer is, why should global employers pay more to our people at any given skill level than they will pay elsewhere in the world for the same skills? The answer, my friends, is they will not. They will not. The other big point we made in our 2006 report is that for every job that's being offshored, there are 10 that are being automated. And that rate has increased substantially since 2006. The reason for that is simple. It is cheaper and cheaper to automate jobs given the technology we now have available, and the price of labor is going up. That means automatically we are going to be automating more and more jobs ever faster. So what's the answer? The answer that we put forward in 2006 was pretty simple. And again, Tom got to the same place by an entirely different chain of logic, but it is exactly the same place. We pointed to the Apple Computer Company, and we said, look at Apple. What you see in Apple Computer, and by the way, it's not alone, there are many other companies like it. What you see in Apple Computer is a company that is state-of-the-art, not just in terms of the innards of the computers and computer-related devices that they make. It is state-of-the-art in every single thing it does. It's state-of-the-art in manufacturing, it's state-of-the-art in marketing, it's state-of-the-art in sales. You go to an Apple retail store and it is different from any other retail store you will go to. It does everything differently, and it does everything better. It is right at the state of the art. They can do that because they have to do that, because they are putting a premium price on what they sell. They can get that price because people all over the world want it, because it is palpably different from anything else they can buy, and better. But guess what? They've got competitors all over the world who are chasing their tail in every single thing that they do, in every discipline. So they have to have in their back pockets the next version, the next version, the next product, the next. They have to be state-of-the-art continuously, always, updated, new, never finished, never stopping. Imagine if this country had companies like Apple in every industry in which we choose to be competitive. Then we too could charge a monopoly price for the services we sell and the products we make. Guess what? If we don't do that, we are going to be poor. I'm not talking about the future. What I've described is the dynamics of the present. Let me be clear about what I mean by that. American average wages have been falling for about 15 years. They fall when times are good and they fall when times are bad. Because if we don't get that edge, if we are not more creative and innovative, if we are not inventing the future faster than the competition, then all we can sell is commodity labor in the world market, and the price of our labor will fall until it meets the price of labor in China coming up. And it has a long way to go. And I'm not predicting the future, I'm telling you what's going on as we speak today. The key, if that is the right analysis of the problem we face, is of course having a population which is not merely in a conventional sense well-educated. That is to say, we have to have scores on PISA that match those of the top performing countries in the world. But that is not enough, because there are countries that score that well on PISA who charge less for their labor than we do. So we have to score that well, the entire population, and offer something extra to justify the world paying us what we are currently charging. So how do we get there? Well, first of all, there are two tasks. One is to match the performance of the best, and the second is to exceed it. So in our 2006 report, we basically compared the United States' current performance to the performance of our competitors. And you know all that. I don't have to tell you what the scorecard says. It is pretty terrible. We have been studying our competitors, that is, those countries with the best education records, for 22 years. We know a lot about what they have done, and we know what the strategies are that they have used to get there. The strategies they have used are remarkably similar. Remarkably similar. Whether we're talking about Singapore or we're talking about Finland, whether we're talking about Canada or whether we're talking about Japan or Shanghai, their strategies are very similar. The details are different, the strategies are much the same. The principles are nearly identical to each other, but not to the United States. The United States is now, if you will pardon me, in the grips of a reform agenda that has virtually nothing in common. Virtually nothing in common with the agenda being pursued by the countries with the most successful education system. This to me is a stunning reality. We are pursuing ideas that are totally untested and untried and are virtually ignoring the experience of people who are beating the pants off us every single day. Let me just give you, and here's to me, a very important point. We have an education system that is essentially the same as it was about 100 years ago when we put it together for the first time. That was a system that was designed to produce about an 8th grade level of literacy in the majority of our population and a much higher level of literacy in a small minority. My friends, that is exactly what this country is still doing. You cannot, let me put this another way. The challenge right now is to produce a system which produces for everybody the level and kind of education we have up till now reserved for an elite. You can't do that by squeezing the system that we currently have in place. It was designed to do something different. You have to have a system of a different design. And if you look at the top performing countries, that's exactly what they've done. I'm sorry to say they haven't done it in 4 or 5 years. It has taken them 10, 20, 30, and 40 years. We don't have that kind of time. But we haven't yet accepted the challenge. We don't quite understand yet that we have to really fundamentally redesign the system if we are going to match their performance. Let me just give you just a feeling for what I mean. I'm not going to give you the whole analysis of what they've done and what we need to do. You can read that for yourselves. I just want to finish with an illustration of the point that I just made. The countries that are beating the pants off us believe our rhetoric. Our rhetoric is that teacher quality is the answer. That's what they say too, but what they're doing about it is utterly different from what the United States is doing. In every case, they have greatly raised over time, the standards for entry into teacher education institutions until they are roughly comparable. It is about as difficult to get into those institutions as it is to get into institutions preparing students for a career in the law, a career in medicine, a career in architecture, that is to say, the highest status professions. In those countries, the ratio of applicants to acceptances in their teacher education institutions runs between 1 to 6 to 1 to 8 to 1 to 10. Many more applicants than they can accept. When they get into those institutions, they have to, they do this in different ways, but the bottom line is they make absolutely certain that the people who are going to teach their kids have really mastered the subjects that they're going to teach. There is no question of teachers teaching out of subject. It is not done. There is no question in those countries about waiving standards for people to become teachers, which is what we do all the time when we are faced with shortages. They don't have to. They have very high quality teachers. Even in their elementary schools, they typically require that their what we call elementary school teachers, teach either math and science or their native language and social studies. They have to have majored or at least minored in those subjects in college, prepared themselves for what they are going to teach in the same way that people who will make careers in those subjects prepare themselves. They absolutely insist that their teachers master the craft. Typically, this includes at least a year of apprenticeship to master teachers. We don't even have a category called master teachers, never mind insist that our prospective teachers spend a year apprenticing to them. They pay their teachers comparably in almost all of these countries to the pay of beginning engineers. In many of these countries, they are moving teacher education into their universities and away from second and third tier institutions. So let me just finish by saying the following. In those countries, summing up, they have very high standards for their teachers going into teacher education. They insist that they know their subject. They insist that they know their craft. They give them enormous preparation going into the job itself. They pay them very well, and something I left out, they give them enormous discretion in the way they do their job, as is done in other professions, true professions. What happens as a result of that is that the kids learn. These are the top performers I'm describing. And because that happens, they get enormous public support. And because that happens, even more kids who could have been doctors, lawyers, and architects choose instead to be teachers. And because that happens, student performance increases even more, and teacher pay goes up, and it becomes even easier to attract first-rate people into teaching. What happens in this country? In this country, our standards for teachers are very, very low. If you can't get into any other professional school in the college or university, you are sent to a school of education. We have no expectations of our elementary school teachers knowing much at all about the subjects that they teach, and we waive those requirements for secondary teachers routinely. Our idea of a great new idea for teacher education is to forget it. That is to say, to recruit people who know their subject and give them 3 weeks of training as a teacher. These other countries could not conceive of doing that. As I said earlier, they never waive their standards for teachers. Teachers' pay in the United States is in the basement. There are many, many states in which a teacher cannot possibly support a family on his or her salary. What's the result of that? The result of that is what we see in the United States today. We see government and the public attacking teachers and their unions. We see young people making choices of career, deciding not to be teachers. Do any of you have any idea what the fall off in applications is now in our schools of education around the country? It's astonishing. But think about it. If you were a young person and you could be an architect, a doctor, a lawyer, and you looked at what is being said about teachers, about schooling, about the prospects, about teachers being fired left and right, would you choose teaching today? They aren't. So what happens? In a situation like that, what we have now got in an age of test-based accountability is a situation in which student performance, instead of rising, is falling, produces enormous anxiety among the public, who is searching for ways to hold teachers accountable, which is making people who could be really good teachers decide they don't want to be teachers at all, which is doing what? Choking off the supply of people who could otherwise solve the problem, which is making it even worse, which will lead to calls for even tougher accountability. This country, in my view, is now in the grip of a vicious cycle with respect to teacher quality, which is going to condemn us for years to come to teachers who are not going to be able to do this job that this country desperately needs to have done. And we are astonishingly ignoring the experience, which I just described, of the countries in which a virtuous cycle is clearly evident with respect to teaching quality and is resulting in ever better student performance. It's our choice. By the way, and this is not unimportant, it is no more expensive to do what they are doing than it is to do what we are doing. It is actually cost neutral.